Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Big Time Boxing Show. And I'm delighted you joined us because I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation as we talk about a very special event, the WBC Grand Prix tournament, which features young boxers trying to make their way in the professional ranks and have a very special vehicle to try and push their careers along. It is started a couple of weeks ago, and there will be three more installments of it in which we're going to see these young boxers try and make their way. In the last episode of it, 128 fighters in 64 fights in the super lightweight, the featherweight, the middleweight, and heavyweight divisions, kicking off the tournament. And it was a very, very special event. And we're going to talk all about it with the man who announced the event and probably has never worked so hard in his young life. And he did a great job on the tournament. Our good friend Corey Erdman joins us. Corey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to. Which elements of that are true? Do I feel young? I'm not sure. Is it the hardest that I've ever worked in a 4-day period as a broadcaster? Unquestionably, yes. And that includes doing like the Pan Ams and Olympic stuff. And this was a different level.
Those kinds of events. You mentioned the Pan Am Games, which you did. The only thing I can go back to in my history. Well, I did the Olympics in 1992 and 1996, and on those occasions, you do a ton of fights. I did the sports festivals for ESPN, where again it was like fast food boxing, which is what you had here, where you just continually do it. But I think that what you did over that weekend exceeded almost anything that I can remember for anyone doing. Now, just from that, before we get into all the fights, even just from your perspective, the preparation for all those fighters, and you are known for your preparation as being the most prepared broadcaster probably in existence, that was a daunting task. Getting through that part, I would think going into this tournament was not easy.
No, and I think that may have been the most daunting task. Like being on the air for 10 hours a day, trying to have enough energy for 16 fights per day, like that's its own challenge. But you're also building this kind of mental fatigue with the amount of preparation that you have. So in total, for the first round, I had written 140 pages of notes typed, like in a size like 11 or 12 font. So it was, and I think in total, I probably had about 6 days notice before arriving in Saudi Arabia in terms of who the entire field was. And that field changed. There were a lot of kind of last minute replacements because of travel issues or weight or what have you. So it was a lot of preparation even before I got there. And then it was waking up and saying, okay, is the bracket that I have currently correct? Have there been replacements? Right. And then having to kind of, in part, restart that process every morning. So it was between the preparation and then just the being on the air for that long, if not for about 600 milligrams of caffeine tablets per day while on the air, I don't know if it would have been possible.
If you printed out all those notes, you would have killed about 50 trees, I think.
Yeah, and the environmentalist in me, really pains me to do that. But I had to do it.
It was mandatory. Yeah. The tournament itself, I gave a thumbnail sketch of it. All young fighters, for the most part, all under 26 years of age, and boxers who are kind of on what we would think of as the showbox level, or kind of similar to some of the fighters that you and I do on our Big Time Boxing series on DAZN, Big Time USA Boxing series on DAZN, and fighters really looking to make their mark, some even below that. It was an important, I think, to Mauricio Suleiman and the folks at the WBC, putting this on DAZN was very important because it gave all these fighters an opportunity to shine. Did you feel the excitement from the fighters about this opportunity?
I did. I think that uh, overall, one of the most enjoyable parts of doing this tournament to this point and moving forward is that there was kind of a purity and a joy around the event, because you think about who these fighters were by and large. Like, as you described, they're fighters that we would know as in and around that showbox level, but with very few exceptions, they're fighters without what we would know of as a major promoter.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, coming from countries where maybe the domestic level isn't all that vibrant. So
Right.
by and large, these were guys that were talented but weren't getting a lot of opportunities, and they were in that kind of position. Listen, we know how the boxing business works. By and large, these are guys that if they were to get an opportunity on a DAZN or another major network, it was going to be maybe a short notice type of opportunity against a blue chip prospect coming in as an opponent. And suddenly, these are 128 guys who were waiting for an opportunity. In most cases, had no idea when that big break would come from. If you're a fighter from Nigeria, let's say, and you've beaten basically everyone in the middleweight division domestically in Nigeria, where is your break coming from if
Right.
this fight doesn't materialize? Well, it's as a B-side, and it's a Hail Mary type of opportunity. And instead, these guys are placed, they get a flight to Riyadh, in most cases are getting the biggest payday of their young careers, and they get to fight on this major platform with all the bells and whistles and all the accoutrements that come with fighting on a major platform. There was really a joy and a hope about this tournament in a very pure way that was really touching, I think, throughout. And my job was to help tell the stories of
Yeah.
128 guys that, by and large, for the most part, except for the real hardcore fans that are out there watching the types of boxing streams that I might, were not familiar with. And so I was given the privilege of getting to introduce people to these people that otherwise would not have been known whatsoever.
Yeah, you wrote a really good article column on the Ring website about this tournament, and one of the things you talked about in the article was that losses here were not the death knell for these fighters, and in many cases the losses simply raised their profile. You mentioned the fight between Crisalto Beltran, who lost to Alan David Krenz, and which one might have been one of the best fights of that 4-day period. That fight didn't do anything to hurt him really, because it was a great fight and he showed great resilience, and in a way that'll give him other opportunities.
Exactly, yeah. Because in one of the reasons was because we'd thrown out like within the confines of this tournament, you throw out what we know as the ecosystem that
Yeah.
prospects are developed in. So, in a normal circumstance, yeah, Beltran takes a loss and suddenly he's 8-1 and he's not as tantalizing to promoters. But in
Yeah.
this circumstance, he's put in a 50-50 fight, and we understand that he had another prospect across from him, and they had a hell of a fight. And I'm not going to name names, but after that broadcast, I had at least 3 people text me about Beltran, the guy that lost that.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
anecdotally, here's a guy that would have taken a loss in the first round of that tournament, but because it was an exciting loss and because he had tested himself against another extremely tough prospect, he will get other opportunities, might even come out of this with a promotional deal. So
Yeah.
that, and that, it just goes to show that if we don't want losses to matter the way that they seem to matter presently, they don't have to. You can just scrap that whole belief system if you want to.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And the other aspect of this that I thought was fascinating is the international flavor. I think 41 countries were represented in this. And I liked it was fun to me as a viewer seeing that they were from everywhere, right? And it seemed like there were some fans, intrepid fans, that made the trip to Riyadh to see them. Did you feel like that, even, and of course you must have, even in being around the fighters and talking to them, that international flavor, I thought, gave it a really great extra feel?
Yeah, I thought it was wonderful. I mean, I think we're kind of attuned to thinking of boxing prospects coming from a small handful of
Yeah,
nations,
right.
and then every once in a while someone kind of slips through. But in this tournament, on short notice, we saw fighters like holding their own with
Hmm.
Uzbek and Kazakh and Ukrainian national amateur champions, right? Where
Yeah.
in a normal circumstance you would see that list of attributes and anyone on the other side of that matchup, and you would think that they're going to be toast. And in fact, when put in a fair situation with the same notice,
Right.
and again, these guys didn't know who they were fighting until 2 days before the fight.
That's pretty amazing.
Even the playing field, right? And we
Yeah.
saw that there's talent coming from a lot of different places. We saw the what I found very interesting too, as someone that loves studying kind of boxing technique, is seeing where the influence has come from. Fighters from other countries that had clearly borrowed stylistic influence from other places,
Right.
and then seeing just kind of those inherent differences that fighters from different nations tend to bring to the table, but not always. We often like to say things like Mexican style, as if
Right.
Mexican fighters fight one particular way. You'll see little stylistic ticks, sure, but how they actually fight is actually quite diverse. And seeing that play out over a field of 128 fighters was really, really fascinating.
The and you mentioned that some of these fighters coming from countries we don't traditionally think of as boxing countries, like from Jordan, Finland, places that were really different. And I would think the gratitude that they had to be part of this probably was even heightened by that.
100%. Yeah, it is very, very difficult. Let's just take Finland, or again, I've
Yeah.
mentioned Nigeria, somewhere like that, to break out of your national domestic level ecosystem without taking a really wild risk and going on the road. It's hard to get discovered because people aren't looking
Hmm.
there. It's hard to develop in quite the same way as you would, let's say, if you're a prospect from the United States,
Yeah.
where there's a deeper talent pool where you could be maneuvered in such a way where you're getting different types of tests as you're moving up. When you're coming from a country where there is a shallower talent pool, you win your national title, and then you've kind of experienced everything that you can at that point, unless you have a manager or a promoter who has the funds to bring people to you to have the kinds of development fights that we see on US television. If you're a Matchroom or a Golden Boy prospect, you have a manager and you have a
Yeah.
promoter willing to pay the money to develop you in a certain way, in that traditional way that we've seen over the last couple of decades on television. You don't have that luxury if you're fighting somewhere else in a non-traditional market, let's say, and if you don't have that financial backing. So for those fighters just suddenly appearing on the big stage and getting a fair opportunity where they were given the same degree of fairness as their opponent, the 2 days notice, that kind of
Hmm.
ambiguity as to what the test is, you're just not going to get a better opportunity if you're one of those fighters than this tournament.
And the tournament had a number of things in it in terms of rules, that the replay rule, the open scoring rule, which the WBC has. I've announced some fights with the open scoring rule, and the WBC is one of the organizations that is most, I think, interested in promoting the idea of open scoring. Um, it didn't seem to create too many issues during the course of this, in terms of either fighters coasting or fighters not performing. In fact, some of the fighters kind of used it a little bit to help them.
100%. Yeah, I didn't find that it hindered the action whatsoever, and
Hmm.
I said as much in my ring column as well, that the main critique of open scoring is that fear that a fighter
Right.
learns that they are ahead and they coast, and that makes for bad boxing television. But I would argue that even in fights without open scoring, if you think that you're
Right.
drastically ahead in a fight, you probably have a good feeling of that. And if you then have the impetus to want to coast, you'll probably do that whether open scoring tells you that it's permissible or not. But the flip
good point.
side, the flip side is that it conclusively if you're behind and you need to make actual changes. The other thing is that it allows hearing open scoring, and I wrote about this as well, and we saw this because the corners are of course mic'd up. They can not just learn what the score is, but you can then take in that data and say, okay, based on what my fighter is doing, maybe this judge or these two judges don't like that. So you can make a wholesale change. If you've been boxing off the back foot and you think you're winning, but the judges aren't seeing that, you can make an adjustment as to what they're seeing.
And that's similar. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's similar to, we're watching the NBA playoffs and other sporting events where maybe the referees are calling it looser that day, so they're going to make an adjustment. The coach is going to say, well, nobody's calling anything when you go into the paint, so either don't do it or, figure out a way to do something different. So in a way, this is the same thing.
Exactly. Well, and it's similar to baseball. If Tarek Skubal has an umpire that isn't calling stuff up in the zone, you're probably going to start altering what you're doing. And it's the only sport in the world where there is one-on-one sort of physical, not just combat, but competition, where you have no idea of the scoreboard, and this changes that. What I found interesting too, and this is outside of the fight itself, it actually changes a little bit what we're doing as broadcasters.
Yes.
I'm actually curious to hear your take on this, because what we do generally is we're making a very educated guess.
Right.
I hope that it's very educated guess as to what we think is happening in the fight and how the judges are scoring it, and we're calling it according to that. But this actually takes the guesswork out of it. In some ways, it makes it easier on us as broadcasters, because after 2 rounds, I know what the judges are seeing, and now I could take the guesswork out of that, and I'm not even telling the audience necessarily what I think is happening.
That's right.
I'm talking about what is physically on the scoreboard, and that, I think, makes it makes our job a little bit easier, and it actually ensures that we're telling a more accurate story each and every time, because it's removed a lot of that guesswork.
And it also eliminates, interestingly, something that is endemic to boxing announcing that isn't endemic to other sports, because, and you alluded to it, one of my pet peeves forever are boxing announcers who are only obsessed with giving an opinion of what's happening and trying to guide the viewer to a place that they're convinced is happening, rather than reporting on the micro things happening in the boxing match. And in this case, the macro picture is known to us. So now you aren't doing that. You are commenting on what we know is fact. And that, at least in my opinion, takes away that whole idea that announcers are trying to guide you to a certain conclusion in your head as a viewer.
Exactly. You could still have a discussion then on the air as to whether you agree with those scorecards that you hear, but then, to continue with your analogy, the lines have been drawn for you to color with.
Yes.
You don't have to dictate where they are, which I actually found, especially given the ask in terms of the gig, made it a lot easier, right? Because after 10 fights, your brain starts to go to funny places. Yeah. And maybe you start questioning whether, you are seeing things accurately as you start to fatigue on the air. It's a lot easier if I know what the scorecards are after 4 rounds. I can speak to that.
Yeah, really good point. When is the next segment of the tournament happening?
So the next stage will be in June. I'm waiting for the official dates. I'm understanding that it'll be in and around June 19th will be stage 2 of that tournament. And then it's all building towards the finals in December, which may be paired with another major event where that final or the 4 finals could be part of an undercard, let's say. That's
a good idea.
Yeah.
Sure, that will add some excitement to it. I think as this builds and the pool gets smaller, it'll be even more opportunity for the individual stories of the fighters to become known and for people to look at it. I would urge people, this exists on DAZN, the first stage. And so if you feel like going back and taking a look, if you didn't get to see it, go back. And the nice thing about even watching it now is you can flip through, and if you don't like a fight, go to the next one. And
Exactly.
you're probably going to find something great, because there was a great variety of boxing action. There were decisions, there were knockouts, there were a few mini controversies. There were everything that you would want to see in boxing. You got a chance to look at in this tournament. So I urge people to go and check it out on DAZN. You will be on DAZN next. This show will air just a little bit before it. For the Canelo Alvarez William Skull fight, you'll be heading back to Riyadh for that. And that will be Alvarez defending against a fighter obviously he's a big favorite against, though the undercard has some excellent fights on it. It would take a lot for William Skull, obviously, to pull an upset. Where would you put that on the upset scale if you were thinking about like the impact of that upset? I mean, you don't have to compare it to specific fights, but just on what level would you put that if somehow William Skull was able to create an upset in that fight?
Oh gosh, I mean that I think that you framed it very well in terms of like the impact of it, because in terms of betting odds, it might not actually be as big of an upset as, oddly enough, Bruno Sarace beating Jaime Munguia last year, right? So
who is he? Yeah, right. Who is he's having a rematch with? Yeah,
he's having a rematch with, right? So I think we always have to categorize when people ask about how big of an upset, and you put it very, very well in terms of impact on the industry. That feels like a Frankie Randall upsetting Chavez, Chavez Senior type upset, if that were to happen.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a great analogy to it.
It kind of upsets these plans that are laid out for the ultimate Canelo versus Crawford matchup a little bit later. Given that those are kind of set in stone, to take a hammer to those plans, it has a gargantuan impact. And listen, for a guy like William Skull, who is not afraid to take part in a fight that is at a low tempo, if he can use his feet to negotiate that with a version of Canelo that isn't the type of high output puncher that he was when he was younger, it's not an outright impossibility. This is a genuine challenge for Canelo here.
Yeah, well put, because that is Skull's. He is very much a boxer. He deadens fights, creates which you can do, as you point out, against Canelo now, because he doesn't punch in terms of volume the way he did maybe when he was younger. So that would be interesting. Well, that'll give you something interesting and fun to talk about when you do the broadcast, that's for sure. I love your Detroit Tigers spring training hat.
Yes.
You, of course, are a great Tigers fan, known for that. And that's a very stylish hat.
Thank you. I mean, I have to celebrate being in first place and having the best home start in 113 years. It's been a long time since the days of Tris Speaker and Ty Cobb, Al.
The Tigers showed last year they were headed here.
Yes.
And you and I had many conversations about it. And it's great when a team, gives you the foreshadowing of it, and then they get to do it. So I'm very happy for you. And as a Cubs fan, I'm kind of enjoying this season as well.
Maybe we'll get the Tigers Cubs World Series that we've been thinking about since 1935?
Well, I believe, wasn't it 1984 when it looked like it was going to happen?
Of course.
And everybody thought, oh my God, that'd be the greatest World Series ever.
1945, how foolish of me, sorry.
Yeah, 45, right, that's right. And then 84, we were thinking of it, so... Anyway, Corey, so grateful that you joined me to discuss this. I think the tournament is a lot of fun. It's a great endeavor. And I'm going to say on the air here, or digitally on the air, I guess, that what you did at that tournament was really excellent, because it's a daunting task, very difficult to do that many boxing matches in a row and very difficult to be prepared for it. As I mentioned, that's one of your strengths. But you were able to navigate through all that and do a great job on it. So you really helped viewers enjoy the experience, which it turned out to be a good experience.
Well, it was a great honor, and as daunting as the work was for me, I'm a kid in the candy store. If you tell me, hey, you get to research 128, broadly speaking, obscure boxers,
Yeah.
You can't dangle a juicier carrot in front of me. So it was an honor to get to do it.
Yeah, and once you're on the air, as this tournament did, it wasn't monotonous. It wasn't a monotone thing. There were ups and downs. There were different elements to it. So once you're doing that, now you're in your element, and it's a fun endeavor, even if it's a long time in doing it. So did a great job, Corey. Thank you so much. We'll be looking forward to seeing you on the Canelo Alvarez William Skull card, and it should be a fun night of boxing in a weekend that is filled with boxing, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. So there'll be a lot of boxing activity.
It's gonna be a busy one. It's always an honor, Al, and you and I will be back on the air together in about a month's time or so.
Yes, right? It appears early in June we'll be back together doing the big time Boxing USA series, and that'll be you and I, and of course Raul Marquez. So that'll be a lot of fun. Thanks very much, Corey.
Take care.
So that was Corey Erdman, who I have said to you many times on this show and elsewhere, one of the finest boxing broadcasters going today. And he did an excellent job on the WBC series, Grand Prix tournament. And I am looking forward to seeing the rest of that tournament as this year unfolds. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time here on our Big Time Boxing Show. Take care, everybody.